I think Kirby Smart has a point.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me are Jarvis Davis and Brian Gebhardt. This Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The baseball field, the basketball court, seems like the Dogs just excel everywhere. We'll talk about it in Next Up. And the Dogs took one step closer to shoring up the DB room for next season. On Monday, we'll go between the hedges to discuss. But first, we'll talk about a little issue that's reared its ugly head yet again in Athens. Sacovie White was arrested in jail Saturday for reckless driving, according to Athens Clark County Police. The arresting officer's report obtained by the AJC said White was, quote, traveling at a high speed the wrong way. Now, this is the second driving-related arrest of the year for the program, with Trevor Etienne getting arrested in March on 4 driving-related charges. So, Jarvis, here's what Kirby Smart said following Etienne's arrest. Quote, we have more kids with vehicles now than we probably ever have. Just the number of players with vehicles is higher, but that's not any excuse for the ability to speed. So are the seemingly increasing number of traffic incidences more a product of access, or do you buy into the there's a problem in Athens narrative in this area?
Well, I think the first thing that came to mind when you sent this over to me, I started looking and started thinking about it. I was like, I went back to, I had to go back in time. I remember a time when you were a freshman, you couldn't drive. You could not drive. You especially if you stayed on campus, you could not drive. And I'm thinking like, okay, that started to make sense. Right now, you got the whole NIL piece. You got all this access to money. And of course, you're going to buy. And when I started laughing just a little bit, I know it's not that too funny, but when I saw somebody was hanging outside the car of outside of a Dodge Charger, I was like,
get it right.
God,
like,
that's so stereotypical.
Hanging outside of a Dodge Charger. All of it.
I was like, golly, man. But it kind of puts it in perspective. Like, so these things are different. College coaches didn't have to deal with that because, like I said, freshmen didn't drive. I remember like that wasn't just exclusive to the school that I went to. I know a lot of people that said, hey, if you lived on campus as a freshman, you could not drive to school. You couldn't bring your car, for a lot of reasons, right? And now that I look back, I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. If you put a Dodge Charger with an RT or a Dodge Challenger with the souped up motors, the RT and all the SRTs and all that stuff. Yeah, they're gonna test it out. They're gonna push it to the limit.
I would. And, I mean, come on, everybody.
Like I will. Like to this day, I will. So I just think that Kirby Smart might be on to something, because when you think about it, because we see it, we know it, because hey, we cover the team and we talk about these guys on a weekly basis. So it would seem like it's a lot, but I think that like Kirby might be on to something, because this is stuff we're not used to. And I think that even though I love the fact that he's got access to all this money and everything like that, and they can be able to live and maybe even throw something back to their parents and everything like that, and really take care of some households, but it has to be rules. It has to be rules in place if these guys are going to continue to go out and buy these type of cars and act a fool in them. Like, you have to be some rules, because at the end of the day, you don't want to get into a situation where you have the Chandler Croy and Devin Willock situation again, because that's what Kirby definitely doesn't want.
Yeah, because that's where your mind goes back to, Brian. You just see, and when you see things like, and you put it together, it's a Charger, it's an orange Charger, it's a guy hanging out or someone hanging out of the window, just kind of playfully, but something like that could have really, really detrimental consequences leading up to, as you just mentioned, the loss of life. So not just optically is it not a good look, but it's more of, okay, this could actually be consequences and repercussions that we know we've all seen before covering UGA. But on the same token, you also don't want to overreact, because you do have a situation where you have more access for more people to more cars these days than ever before. Yes, NIL being the prime reason for that from an athletic perspective, but how do you just kind of manage through making sure the narrative doesn't become the narrative again, while at the same time kind of acknowledging that, maybe we do need to look at some of what the rules and criteria are for others, say freshmen. That may not mitigate the problem for your upperclassmen who are doing such a thing like your transfer Trevor Etienne, but it may mitigate maybe your freshmen having at least access, because right now that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to mitigate.
Yeah. Sometimes I miss those scooter days, where just they're all the guys around. That's it. It's just like, here's 8 scooters. Oh, look,
inline stage
here we go. But yeah, to your point, there's a couple different factors with this. The access part is weird just because I think Sacovie's still so young. Like, I can just speak to my experiences going to Athens as a freshman, not as a football player, just as a regular student. I was a wild child. Like, it was the first time that it was like just released out in the open. Things are happening, all that type of stuff. So I dealt with that on a non-athlete standpoint. You add everything that, being an athlete gives you and different things that you can get into and all that type of stuff. It's easy to be able to, make a silly decision in that way. I do think this particular one, some people see the headline, maybe don't read the whole story and don't check it out. It was a problem, but it wasn't that serious in the sense of like what Etienne did and what he went through and what he got in trouble for was much worse than what happened here with Sacovie White. And everything that I haven't had the chance to meet him or speak with him or anything like that, but everything you read or know about this kid is that he's the next kind of almost spokesperson for the team. Like, he's the next Kyrus Jackson, the next Malcolm Mitchell type, where he's going to be the one representing the university, Cedric Van Pran, Granger, like guys like that, where it's like, hey, SEC Media Days, hey, we're going to a children's hospital, whatever it might be. Sacovie White's going to be the type of person that does that. So it's one of those, it's May 21st. So like, let's get to August, let's get to September, because you just hope that another thing doesn't happen in these situations. But yeah, it's tough when, these freshmen just it's a different experience for them now too, not only from the athlete standpoint, but just being on a college campus for the first time too.
Indeed. Now, spring practice and the transfer portal open window have come and gone, and ESPN thinks there's a clearer picture of the top 25 in college football. Now, Brian, even after Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas all had these major hauls in the transfer portal, Georgia's still in the number 1 spot because of the players they've already developed. The article said Carson Beck is primed for a big season with plenty of playmakers, but Michael Williams, yes, here we go. We couldn't get through the first segment without talking about him.
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
Writer Mark Schleyback feels is primed for a breakout season, is the guy that really the article kind of hinged Georgia's chances on to get back to the top. Now, do you believe as well that the Dogs' hopes, their dreams, their aspirations to return to championship form are hinging on 13 having that kind of season as he kind of shifts gears to outside linebacker?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily just Michael. Like, because if he winds up at the end of the year with 7 sacks or something that we look at, that's like a lack of production, so to speak. I think it's really the linebacking core as a whole is going to wind up carrying this team a good bit. What you see from what CJ Allen brought to the end of the season last year, and just the athleticism and the speed that they have, and kind of going about it a different way, moving Michael, to that outside, like having him stand up is going to be a whole different ball game. So I think it's the unit as a whole and not necessarily Michael. And Jarvis, don't you worry. I know you were out last week. We got in a solid couple minutes of Michael Williams because you weren't there. Yes. We had to, we like Michael just as much. You may have been there first, but we had to represent for you as well. So we got it in last week, the Michael minute.
A tradition unlike any other. I love it. But yeah, man.
Brian's right, Jarvis. It's not just about Michael. And Schleyback did say that in addition to that, he's sort of that second tier being Malachi Starks and what he'll be able to do when in full and healthy form.
Yeah, I think when you think about, Malachi Starks, guys like Julian Humphreys as well, like we know he kind of dangled and played around with leaving and then making the decision to come back. Mm-hmm. And we know what we saw out of him last year towards the end of the season. Julian Humphreys played really well. He was like one of those go-to corners, like, okay, this is the guy that's going to be next up, because we understand what it means to come play corner for the University of Georgia and those guys going on to the NFL from a developmental standpoint. So I think that, granted, yes, Michael Williams is going to be very, very important. Like I think that when you think of it, not only sacks, I'm talking about TFLs, like those are game-changing type plays as well, because all those things come together and just say, you know what? We got a guy that we have to mark every time when they're coming up with game plans on how they're going to attack the Bulldogs on defense. They have to circle 13. If they have to circle 13 every week, that's going to be a big game changer. Then once he starts doing that, right, it's a trickle down effect or trickle back effect. If I can give you a visual, you talking about Malachi starts forcing bad throws, quarterbacks worrying about 13 and wondering where he is or identifying him before they come up to the line of scrimmage. If you got that type of that level of quarterback, right? If you start getting to those that the opposing quarterback's head, those Malachi Starks and Julian Humphrey, those guys are going to go get some real opportunities. Linebackers as well. CJ Allen, I think he's going to be a playmaker for sure, like you mentioned on BG. So I understand where Slaybach is going, and like if he plays like I think he is going to play, and I really feel like this is going to be somebody that you're looking at like, oh man, this is going to be a dude, going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, and if he's playing on that level, everybody else going to join the party as well.
Yeah, and maybe that's why, sidebar, ABC and ESPN decided to schedule that Georgia-Clemson game at noon, because maybe they figure, you know what? The Dogs are probably going to so easily dispose of the Tigers that they absolutely don't want that kind of bloodbath in prime time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be interesting to see how that game plays out. I think it's a 2-touchdown line in that game too for the Dogs. I've read some stuff about how ABC really wants to explore kind of owning that 12 p.m. space, because now they're going head to head with that big kick on Fox and that whole thing. I just want to know who lost the bet where they got to play that Miami and Florida game at 3:30 in the swamp at that point. That is going to be a swamp when they play at 3:30, and it might be a more competitive game. But Dabo, get some transfers. Maybe this game wouldn't be at noon.
Oh, you took the words right out of my mouth. This dude lost 12 guys that went into the transfer portal, and he up here talking about, well, these guys aren't good enough, and they're not good enough to come to Cleveland. Okay, all right, okay. You keep on thinking like that, Dabo. You're gonna be dabbing your butt up out of the doggone Clemson at some point.
Right. Keep this up. Well, the Dogs are keeping up good things even going forward, because they're always looking to the future. They took one step closer maybe to shoring up the DB room for next season. We'll go between the hedges to discuss. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. So think about this. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, right? That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and free, because it's not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're looking there, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn understands that small businesses have to wear a lot of hats. So they're constantly trying to find ways to help you, small businesses, to make hiring easier for yourself. They're helping you to write job descriptions, and they're making the process easier and quicker. That's why over 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Locked On Sports Today is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that is programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the background noise. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the Amazon free Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Brian, after visiting Athens multiple times this spring, Carrollton High's 4-star DB Shamar Arnoux confirmed via X Monday he received his offer from Georgia. What would it mean for the Dogs to snag him for the DB room for the class of 2025?
Yeah, it would be really nice. He's a good player, and it's so weird too to see guys that are like transferring to Carrollton to get better. because I think he was from Centennial prior. So it's always, you're like, oh, they've kind of become like a mini Buford in that way of going out there and become such a good program. He would be a nice addition to the DB room. I know right now it seems like it's probably going to be Auburn that he winds up going to. So maybe Georgia is able to snag him there in the last minute. The other thing is going to be interesting is to see how big he gets, because he's about 6'2.5" right now. And to see how much he lengthens out at that cornerback position. So it would be a nice addition to the room. And it's always one of those, it's something that Kirby preaches constantly, to win those in-state recruits. I know that this one is, it's important to him, especially that DB room. There's always seems like there's a little extra with the DBs with Kirby and his experience, both being one and having coached primarily in the past when he wasn't a head coach in that DB room. So yeah, Shamar would be a nice get for the Dogs if they were able to pull him from Auburn.
Yeah, he's scheduled to actually meet with Hugh Freeze and company, and Hugh, once he locks in on some people, he's pretty much going to do whatever it takes to get them. So I would be kind of shocked a little bit if he were to go to Georgia, but I think that Auburn piece is a big one. I think you bring up a good point, BG. Like, I've never seen this much bouncing around on the high school level. Right, it happens a lot. Like, I live out here in the Conyers area. I know Tenitra said I live in Augusta, but that's a whole nother conversation. But like, I remember there was this one kid out in Covington, which is probably like 5 minutes from where I live. He was going to school in Beaufort, and then transferred back to Covington so he can go to his prom. I was just like, what is going on?
No way, Jarvis. No way.
Yes, he played football for Beaufort, and then he transferred back because he wanted to go, I think he went Newton High School, and so he can go to prom. I was like, man, what is going on out here? So, but yeah, I saw the list of high schools. I thought it was like a different player. I was like, why does this man have multiple high schools on his doggone profile? So yeah, I think it's very interesting what these coaches have to deal with. Like, they have to be so locked in, pun intended, when it comes to making sure they following along with these players and where they are, and like you said. But if it don't matter what the list of schools are, if Kirby coming knocking and offering, boy, like, he might get his guy.
Yeah, right. It reminds me of almost like a Dylan Raiola situation, just in terms of like, that's the one name I go back to all the time, where it's every single year. And then it makes me, it also makes you think, like, because these high school coaches don't get paid anywhere near these college coaches and what they make. And they're re-recruiting every year at these different levels and these different spots, and trying to keep their guys for the ones you can't really recruit. And I just think about what a mess that is if you're, coaching 15-year-olds that are doing this, let alone 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are trying to transfer on a regular basis. So
that's exactly where my question was going to be with you guys, just to follow up on how we were talking about, and I'm going to use your verbiage, Jarvis. I kind of like that, where we normally say trickle down, but I want to even say trickle back, because it feels like everything is going. I'll give you an example. My nephew, who plays soccer, right? He follows all the international soccer teams. He follows Atlanta United. He's like, big on soccer, and had already in 8th grade done all the research he needed to do to make the case for relocating from Louisiana to Georgia so that he can be in the training program for ATLU TD2, so that he could go ahead and be prepared to be potentially a homegrown player that they would select. I mean, he had like a whole like proposal together in the 8th grade. And also, all I did was set up his profile for rec soccer, guys, for recreational soccer. And already I'm getting like inundated with emails every single day because he played defense. And, so it's like, ooh, he's a defender, 8th grade. So like you guys said, I mean, how difficult is it? And again, we'll get back to Georgia in a sec, but I just had to ask, like, how difficult is it now for these high school coaches? And let's just keep it real, even for junior high coaches, to have to keep up with all of this. And these guys are actually pretty much expected to also be teachers. Most of them do have to be in the classroom in some way to perform. And you guys know some of them. I think, Jarvis, you have a boy here, one of your guys who's like was the coach at one point and the AD, and he had to teach a class. I mean, a lot of pressure on these coaches to be able to be in position to try to wrangle their students to get an education, wrangle their students to be good student athletes, and then at the same time wrangle them to, heck, just keep the darn kids at your school and not have to worry about them moving on to that next school.
I think it's a matter of they've a lot of coaches that, like I said, I've had several homeboys, including the one that you mentioned, T, that have come to the realization that if certain schools come a knocking, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Like, because you're gonna run yourself ragged trying to quote unquote compete with those guys.
Yeah.
So there are certain schools that everybody knows about. There's no secret. There's so much access to information, like you talked about with your nephew. Like, everybody has access to that information. So if you know that, hey, XYZ school is pumping guys into power 4 schools, I almost slipped up, power 4 schools nowadays, hey, that's where they're gonna figure out a way to magically come up with a location that that kind of feeds right into that school, and they'll be there. And by the time school starts.
And I like what you said, magically, they will appear in the right zip code or the right zone to be able to go to that particular school for the
most of the time they're apartments, T. Yeah, just kind of give you a little insight there.
Do every day, man. Look, strategy. It's all about strategy. And that, there are schools that do the same in Florida, like Riverview Sumner in Florida. That's becoming, kind of a school that people are looking at and saying, they're kind of turning out some quality players. Most recently, 4-star offensive tackle Zaire Addison, who made his official visit to Athens this weekend. So, Brian, what would it mean for the Dogs to have him in the trenches in 2025?
Oh, it would be really nice. They had a bunch of the recruits over this weekend. A lot of them were at the baseball game, and we're doing that. And that's one thing you kind of forget when you go on these recruiting visits, and sometimes it's about like the other guys, the other recruits that are with these guys, and like the bond that they wind up doing. So there was a lot of good like videos and pictures of the various recruits having a good time at the baseball game. It'd be great to get another big ugly in here, as many 4- and 5-star offensive linemen as you possibly can. I know that's something that, it's one of the positions that's right at the top for Kirby. I mean, of course, it's the depth that's everywhere, but it seems like offensive line, he's been adamant about making sure it is great year in and year out, and the depth of it. And we've seen it with all the rotational pieces too, and having people come in and out. As much as we may not like the rotational offensive line, he's been doing that too. So yeah, he would be an excellent addition. And look at the pedigree the last couple of years of the various offensive linemen who've gone to the league. It's been really nice. So it's easy to say, hey, you could be the next one.
Yeah. And being able to show those guys that there's championship pedigree all over that campus is a beautiful thing. And like you said, they've got more than enough to show, not just on the football field, but also the baseball field, the basketball court. I mean, Dogs just excel everywhere. So we'll talk about that in Next Up. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is brought to you by Yahoo Finance. So wouldn't it be great if you could see all of your investment and retirement accounts in one place, as opposed to having to go to multiple websites to do so? With Yahoo Finance, you can consider your views from multiple accounts into one hub, or consolidate rather, and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. Let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage. Well, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and your financial freedom is what you want to get rid of, right? I know I do. With Yahoo Finance, who's our sponsor today, you can get access to the news, data, and tools you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. For more than 25 years, Yahoo Finance has been the brand behind every great investor, whether you're a seasoned investor or are looking for that extra guidance. Yahoo Finance gives you all the tools and data you need in one place. And they're the number one finance destination, producing a holistic look at the financial news cycle. So for comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor, yahoofinance.com. With a community of over 90 million users each month, the real strength is helping you on your way to financial success. So again, it's yahoofinance.com, the number one financial destination. Make sure after you check out Atlanta Football Party, check out yahoofinance.com. All right, guys, we talked about it earlier, and it's interesting because, like you were saying, Brian, you had many of the potential or the prospects, potential recruits for UGA out in Athens this weekend. and they had a chance to look at a baseball team and a baseball program that's on the rise, starting with Charlie Condon, who was named SEC Player of the Year Monday. So it's a redshirt sophomore, of course, but a walk-on from right here in Marietta, the Walker School, is now considered the #1 prospect in just about every MLB mock draft. He's also the first UGA player since '08 to actually win this award. You know, that's the last time the Dogs went to the World Series, right? So feels like the Dogs are maybe on the cusp of contending for another championship, not on the football field. Amazing.
Yeah. They it'll be incredible if they can go on this baseball run. And it's weird because baseball's so big and so popular in the area with all the East Cobb stuff and the perfect game things that they have going on. So it is one of those where it's kind of like basketball light in that way, where you have all these like Atlanta athletes going to these various SEC schools and trying to get the job done. The other thing that's interesting about that, like you mentioned, we were talking about a minute ago, is the football players actually going to the baseball game as part of a recruiting thing, because that definitely used to not be a thing, because there wasn't that vibe or that atmosphere. There wasn't. I even think I saw on Twitter that Terrence Edwards, who's in the coaching game, and I know that we've all probably talked to at some point in time, he had said he never went to a baseball game the entire time he was at Georgia. So it's just one of the, and now you see it where it's like now they're using it as a recruiting thing. Like, come on, check this whole thing out. And then I believe it's Georgia and LSU that get underway with SEC tournament today. So we'll see how that winds up turning out. But yeah, it's awesome just to have that exposure, have another thing on campus. Like, hey, we do baseball too. So in addition to football, it's nice to see, and we'll see how deep they can go on this run, and see if they can go into next year. And it's I know Charlie Condon in the way is a one-off because he's probably going to be the #1 pick, but like, can the baseball program build off of this and really become a must-see thing? People planning their trips to go out to Athens for a weekend to check out the baseball team. So, yeah.
Well, they got West Johnson as a little bit of a secret weapon, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's the real cool thing about it, because I was just looking at some profile stuff on Condon, because being a #1 overall pick is a big freaking deal. I know we're gonna talk about another #1 overall pick for Georgia in just a second, but like, looking at his profile, like, he kind of, interestingly enough, kind of compares to Matt Olson, because he's tall, he's about 6'6", not necessarily the fastest guy, but once he gets going, he can get a little momentum going around those bases. And I think that when you can compare to a guy like Matt, like, being that first baseman, being a guy that the Braves have kind of sold up, and once they traded for him, they gave him an extension because they know exactly what he's going to be able to bring to the table. So yeah, if Charlie Condon can come anywhere near Matt Olson, I think that's a good comparison, and it's also good for Georgia as well.
Indeed. And speaking of what should be good for Georgia, UGA alum, as you just mentioned, Anthony Edwards, has been pretty much a one-man wrecking crew at times during the NBA postseason. Of course, he helped his Minnesota Timberwolves get back to the Western Conference Finals for the first time in 2 decades. So, sidebar, my old favorite player, Kevin Garnett, that was the last time they got there. My new favorite player, Anthony Edwards, is now the reason that the Minnesota Timberwolves are back in the Western Conference Finals. But after the win against the Denver Nuggets in Game 7 of the semifinal Sunday, Ant-Man told TNT's Charles Barkley, who hadn't been to the Twin Cities in 20 years, to bring your Urs. So, so Atlanta for saying that, right?
So Atlanta, T.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was just like, this dude is representing for the city. Yes, I love it.
You gotta love him, Jarvis. Like, he said what he said.
Yeah, that's just the beauty. Like this, like, I love this playoff, right? Because it's so interesting that all the big names got bounced out. The Kevin Durant, LeBron, Steph Curry, all those guys are out of here. Yep. And it's like the playoffs haven't missed a beat. Like, they probably have been a little bit more exciting, right? Because it's something new, it's something fresh. Yeah. Denver Nuggets, the reigning champions, got bounced out by the new face of the NBA. Yeah, I'm saying it. I don't give a crap. Like, I'm putting it out there. That dude is the guy, and then nobody can touch this dude. As far as you talking about big personality, big basketball game that's ready to just take on anybody. That is, And y'all get ready. Ant-Man about to take over for sure.
The press conferences alone, like, take the games out of it, have been just awesome, just fascinating. He said, I'll see you in Game 7. He had a little bit more colorful language to add to that as well. But, and then and then him and Kat sitting up there and going, why? Because the reporter was like, you guys have to lose more. You have to lose on a bigger stage. You have to lose. He's like, we lost last year. We lost the year before. We've been losing for 20 years. Like, what do you want us to do? You know? So the fact that you had that was awesome. And then there's a couple other layers with this too, where like,
yes,
Ant didn't even play that well in Game 7, which was wild. Like the T-Wolves defense, it's crazy to see a team take over in the second half with their defense. I can't remember.
Yes.
Maybe we go back to one of those Spurs teams or maybe the Pistons about 20 years ago in terms of like, all right, our defense is just going to put clamps on you, and then that's the end of the game. We haven't seen that in so long. So that was the scary part, I think, for both the league and just moving forward and into this next series is like, Ant went 6 for 24 from the floor, and they wound up coming back from a 20-point deficit in the second half. And he still did this. So it was amazing. And now you have this thing where, and I'm just thinking about this now as we're talking about it, it's like, you know, you have the Luka trade, which we'll talk about till the end of time. But now you have, it's kind of like Ant, who represents the state of Georgia and represents Atlanta, and he's going up against Luka. Like you have that battle. So I feel like everyone in the state, they aren't already behind him, are going to be behind him, especially because he's wearing Atlanta something all the time, whether it be a Braves hat or whatever it might be. But yeah, I'm rooting for him to get it done. I'm hoping the T-Wolves can take this thing.
Yeah, for him to be able to figure out a way to take over a game when he wasn't shooting well and just saying, hey, I'm about to take Jamal Murray out the game.
Yep.
Like I got Jamal, y'all worry about everybody else. And for him to actually go out there and do it, and when he's not shooting well, but he had some timely threes in that fourth quarter as well. But just overall, you just look at it, it's like, yeah, man, this is the NBA playoffs that I've been missing.
Yes.
I don't know about y'all, but I've been missing this type of NBA play. I don't want to see 130 to 120. I don't want to see that crap in the playoffs. Sorry.
I agree, because even like what we saw in that Game 7 for Knicks Pacers, like that worked. That worked because fight. And I think going back to just real quick what you guys said, that's what made this series so amazing as well, because people keep saying, oh, well, Anthony Edwards didn't shoot well. Well, that's not the complete story. Anthony Edwards got harassed. Like, don't get wrangled, because remember, the refs were letting them play the first half. So he got harassed a lot and got out of rhythm thanks to the Nuggets defense, but he figured it out along with his coach, along with his team, trusting his teammates, listening to his coach, telling him, hey, run the floor. And then, like you said, that opportunity, the beauty that we never get to see, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, Naj Reid, 3 bigs that actually got to impact a game. What are you talking about?
Old school.
Actually get you back in a game. Oh my God. You mean fundamental basketball was played and it actually worked? Imagine that. But more importantly, maybe for this Georgia program, fundamental basketball worked under a guy who was in this program. And maybe he wasn't in under Mike White. I get that. But ultimately speaking, I feel like you guys said, he's always repping for the A. Georgia has to figure out a way to embrace that, like especially in the offseason, get him to be your face of your program as well, so that you don't lose more of these players to the likes of Auburn and Kentucky and other kind of SEC basketball powerhouses. You can become that powerhouse as well, like you have in baseball. You're going to use Charlie Condon. He's going to be the face to bring in more great recruits along with Wes Johnson. Mike White, now you've got to go and you've got to get Anthony Edwards and say, hey, you started to, like, he did pick up some quality guys from the portal, but I think this is an opportunity for UGA, and might I say, sidebar guys, an opportunity for Atlanta, because we keep telling people that Atlanta, Georgia, and Georgia overall does have a strong basketball haul. Thanks for stopping by the Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Georgia Bulldogs football talk and little Georgia basketball and baseball talk too. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're free and available wherever you download your podcasts. We'll see you on the Atlanta Sports Party on Thursday.